And here we are, 3 years after the insurrection, and we're still living with the consequences of that day.
But this is no more of an insurrection than Black Lives Matter or what's going on in New York now.
I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today.
Clean up on aisle Van Jones 2.0. Get this man some tissues, if we can call him that. Welcome back to One and Done, folks. It's your boy George. Today we're going to be diving into this video, revisiting January 6th. Is it for real or is it a psyops? Inside job? Well, MSNBC don't want you to think that. Even though their poll numbers are going to show that people are starting to wake up, especially as this footage comes about, and people like Vivek Ramaswamy and Tucker Carlson red-pilling everybody and bringing the truth to light. So without delay, let's dive in. Roll that tape.
And here we are, 3 years after the insurrection, and we're still living with the consequences of that day, the persistent threats to our democracy. With Republican voters casting their first presidential primary ballots this month, and with Donald Trump continuing to hold a commanding lead, even expanding lead in the polls, we're faced with the possibility, the startling possibility, that the man impeached for inciting the rioters on January 6th could be elected again.
Now, Donald Trump was impeached, but he wasn't charged with insurrection or inciting an insurrection. And as far as I know, no one was charged with inciting an insurrection. I think there was 950 people charged to being associated with the riot, but it wasn't an insurrection.
The man who claimed the insurrectionists had love in their hearts, who referred to January 6th as a beautiful day, and who vowed to pardon the rioters criminally charged in connection with the violence, people he now calls hostages. Yesterday, in his first campaign speech of 2024, President Biden issued a warning about what's at stake.
Trump began his 2024 campaign by glorifying the failed violent insurrection on our Capitol. The guy who claims law and order sows lawlessness and disorder. Trump's not concerned about your future, I promise you. Trump is now promising a full-scale campaign of revenge and retribution, his words.
Now, the funny thing is, the party that claims that they want democracy, they are doing everything within their power to stop Donald Trump from running. The poll numbers are speaking. The Democratic Party has been in office for 3 years, and the people are starting to realize, according to the poll numbers, that this has been horrific. More wars, record high inflation, crime rates through the roof, no border security at all, 8 million people crossing the border, more drugs coming across, more criminals, more terrorists, more human trafficking. Just imagine if Joe Biden got a second term. Oh my goodness. There literally would be nothing left.
First national election since January 6th. Insurrection placed a dagger at the throat of American democracy since that moment. We all know who Donald Trump is. The question we have to answer is, who are we?
Exactly, who are you? I don't think he knows who he is. Let's be honest. They probably only showed this part of the speech because it's the only part where, he didn't fumble and mumble too much. He actually put a sentence together. We all know he isn't running anything.
The president is right. And the answer to that question from some in the Republican Party is frightening. According to a new Washington Post University of Maryland poll, Republicans are now less likely to believe that insurrectionists were mostly violent and less likely to believe Trump bears responsibility than they were in 2021.
I wonder if that had something to do with all of the tapes that had been hidden for years. All of the footage. They just released selective footage. They hid the rest of the footage from everybody because it told too much of the story. The footage showed that people were being ushered through the building by police. It also showed that some of the crowd was being incited with rubber bullets. So this could be the reason that people aren't believing it. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to work that out.
That's an insult to the hundreds of men and women in law enforcement who fought valiantly before our eyes to uphold their oaths to serve and protect the Capitol against a mob incited by a commander-in-chief who violated his. In the days and weeks following the insurrection, 5 officers died. Officer Brian Sicknick, Officer Jeffrey Smith.
And how did they die? 4 of them, police officers, ended themselves. Now, how suspicious is that? What sort of pressure were they under to toe the line, to tell the story that fits the narrative? Super suspect. The only person to get fatally injured on that day, January 6, was Ashley Babbitt, who I believe was a 14-year Army vet who was fatally shot and lost her life.
Officer Howard Liebengood, Officer Gunther Hashida, and Officer Kyle DeFreitag. More than 100 others were injured, leaving physical and emotional scars. Former D.C. Metropolitan Police Officer Michael Fanone was there that day, there on the west front of the Capitol, battling the mob. He was dragged down the Capitol steps. He was tased by someone in the pro-Trump mob. He suffered a heart attack during the fighting. And in a detail that crystallizes the horror that unfolded on January 6th, Fanone recalls insurrectionists shouting, quote, "Kill him with his own gun." Despite having lived through that harrowing assault and living with the consequences of that trauma, Fanone has not stopped defending our democracy. He has sought to hold those responsible accountable, and he has an urgent message for the American people as the 2024 presidential campaign season gets underway. Fanone told HuffPost, quote, "Ultimately, you, the American voter, will be the last line of defense when it comes to preserving democracy as we know it and ensuring the peaceful transfer of power. And it's that serious." Joining me now in studio is Michael Fanone, former D.C. Metropolitan Police Officer, Courage for America Council member, and author of Hold the Line, The Insurrection and One Cop's Battle for America's Soul. Officer Fanone, I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today. Please tell me your thoughts on this 3rd anniversary.
This dude's trying not to laugh. I mean,
we are still in the midst of the same fight that began on January 6th, 2021.
I got to see this again.
I'm going to try to get through this. Thank you for what you did 3 years ago today.
Damn, is this Van Jones 2.0? Oh my goodness. Do any of these news presenters have any testosterone? This guy's an absolute blubbering mess.
Please tell me your thoughts on this 3rd anniversary.
This guy can't believe what he just said.
We are still in the midst of the same fight that began on January 6th, 2021. And we have a lot at stake in this country. And I think that it deserves every American's attention.
You know, Donald Trump continues to defend the insurrectionists, as he did at a rally in Iowa last night. Listen to this.
Those J6 hostages going to jail for 20 years and 18 years and 12 doctors, lawyers, carpenters, electricians, truck drivers. It's one of the saddest things. It'll go down as one of the saddest things in the history of our country. And they went there to protest a rigged election.
Officer Fanone, how damaging is it for Trump to label those violent rioters who were criminally charged and convicted as hostages? The man who attacked you with that stun gun was sentenced to more than 12 years in prison.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, you got to think about those individuals that received those lengthy sentences. They did so because, A, they engaged in an insurrection, but their actions that day were violent, and that violence...
I believe they were involved in a riot, and 450 of them got charged.
Excuse me, was directed towards law enforcement officers. And so, you know, I think it's clear that they deserve the sentences that they received. But by Donald Trump referring to them as hostages, and speaking about them sympathetically, he's lending his authority as the former president to their actions. And he's telling Americans, his supporters, that I'm going to continue to support you and I'll do everything I can. And if I become president, I'll even pardon you if you can commit acts of violence on my behalf.
What's your response?
When did he say that? He never said that once. He said go to the Capitol and protest peacefully.
To Republicans, particularly those Republicans who responded to the Washington Post University of Maryland poll, who are growing more sympathetic to the insurrectionists?
I don't know what to say to them, and quite frankly, I don't think there is anything to say. They've made their decision. We're 3 years out from the January 6th insurrection. We had the benefit of a bipartisan January 6th Select Committee investigation, which really rolled out the evidence supporting the fact that it was, in fact, an insurrection, that it was intentional, and that it was pre-planned by Donald Trump and members of his administration.
And sorry, where did they find these plans? No plans were found. So this is the most unorganized insurrection in the world, history of the world. This is ludicrous. This is crazy. These people are getting all beat up, depressed, sad. This is all, it's a psyop. This is clown world. We got a presenter here boohoo, whining and crying, bawling his eyes out on television, and this cop mumbling his way through trying to sell a book. If it wasn't insurrection, these words would be popping out of their mouths. This seems like it's just being put together. It's been 3 years, and like the polls are showing, their own polls, people are not believing it. They're not taking it. This is clown world, and people are seeing all the way through it. Thank goodness for people like Tucker Carlson and Vivek Ramaswamy, who have shot bullet holes through this propaganda. And not only that, the Speaker of the House releasing more of the footage, making it available to the public for everyone to scrutinize it.
If they can't see the facts for what they are, then they have aligned themselves and become part of the MAGA insurrectionist Republican Party.
You've had a chance to speak with young voters, some of your travels around the country. What did they tell you? Or what do they tell you about the 2024 election? Do they view it as seriously as you do, you and I do?
No. I mean, it's difficult to convince people, especially younger voters who maybe didn't witness the January 6th attack, weren't old enough to fully appreciate what happened that day. And I mean, quite frankly, I don't think
They're calling you dumb. That's what they're doing. They're calling you dumb because you've come to your senses. They're calling you dumb.
The full story of that day has gotten out to, each and every member of the American population. But they seem to think that other issues trump our democracy. And I think, like many voters in this country, become disillusioned and don't see the significance of the 2024 election.
Oh boy. Let's see if Alan Dershowitz can actually make a little bit of sense of this. But before he dives into the insurrection claims, he's also going to touch on whether states have the right to take Donald Trump off the ballot.
One of the components of this lawsuit that are being questioned is whether or not it applies to the President of the United States, the section of the 14th Amendment. Many legal commentators that I've listened to say that that is the weakest part of Trump's objection. What do you make of that?
Well, it's a technical objection because the term that's used in the 14th Amendment is support. And that's not in the presidential oath. Presidential oath says preserve, protect, and defend. It's a highly technical argument. The much, much stronger argument is Section 5 of the 14th Amendment, which is as clear as could be. It says the Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. In other words, it's Congress, not the states. And that makes so much sense when you think of how the 14th Amendment was passed. It was passed by radical Republican Lincoln Reconstructionists. And the last thing they would want is to let states make that decision, because the states include Mississippi, Alabama, all the Confederate states. So it would have been lunacy for the framers to allow the state courts, like the Colorado Supreme Court, to decide.
Damn, that's a damn good point by Alan Dershowitz. They would never have wanted power in the hands of the states. And this is the reason why.
Decide what is an insurrection and whether it applies to the president or not. This is a decision that's allocated by the Constitution solely to Congress, and it's a power grab by the Colorado Supreme Court. Now, I'm shocked that constitutional lawyers like Lawrence Tribe and Jamie Raskin and Judge Michael Lutek never quote this Article 5. Congress shall have the power to enforce. It means what it says. It means that the states have no business interfering in a federal election.
So I want to ask you two questions. One being, I'm seeing you brought up the insurrection term. I've seen some people, including, I should say, some liberals and some Democrats. There are people who want Trump not to be president again, who have recognized some weaknesses in this ruling. The term insurrection, which is used in Section 3, whether that, even if one thinks Trump has committed some crime or had tried to remain in office beyond legal means, whether that's the same thing as the kind of violently overthrowing or occupying or forming a breakaway state the way the Confederates did, the term insurrection implies. And I'll let you address that first, and then I've got another question.
Of course, insurrection doesn't apply to demonstrations or other kinds of even riots that have gone bad. An insurrection has a particular and precise meaning. We've had insurrections in this country early in our history. We've had some insurrections before the Civil War, but they were attempts to take over the government. Aaron Burr put up an army to try to from Louisiana. That may have been an insurrection, but this is no more of an insurrection than Black Lives Matter or what's going on in New York now, where these Hitler Youth are marching and calling for the overthrow of the United States government because they support Israel. One man's insurrection is another man's protest. And the big issue is who gets to decide what an insurrection is. And the 14th Amendment is clear. The courts don't. Certainly not the state courts, certainly not the Colorado court. It's up to Congress to define what an insurrection is, and it hasn't done it. It hasn't gone a step further and said, boom, well, an insurrection requires these elements, but they haven't done it. And so it can't be enforced. You can't remove somebody from the ballot.
If Trump were, just one quick thing, if Trump were convicted of in one of the four indictment prosecutions he's facing, I've seen some commentators say they think that would make the legal argument for what Colorado has done stronger. Do you agree with that?
I do not agree with that. I think the issue is one of jurisdiction. And of course he could be convicted of insurrection. If he's indicted in the District of Columbia, they'll indict and convict a ham sandwich if his name Trump is on it. 95% of the voters of the D.C. Hate Donald Trump. And so it would be very easy to get a conviction. So I think it's a big mistake for Trump supporters to focus on the lack of a conviction. By the way, I am not a Trump supporter. I want to see Trump defeated fairly. I want to see him on the ballot. I want to have the right to vote against him, and people should have the right to vote for him. But I don't want an unfair election, even though I would welcome a result of Trump being beaten. I don't want him to be beaten unfairly.
And that's a fair point. Let the people decide whether he's guilty or not by going to the ballot box and voting. But we've got to get rid of all this electronic stuff and, people that passed away 10 years ago being able to vote. That stuff shouldn't happen. So Alan Dershowitz made some absolute common sense there. He made sense of the whole thing. This is all being trumped up, so to speak. Now let's get back to that lunacy from MSNBC.
I wrote about your experience on January 6th in an op-ed for the Post back in August of 2021. And we had never met, but you emailed me excuse me, you emailed me after it was published. I have it right here. And you wrote, "Just read your editorial. I can't thank you enough." Michael.
Someone get the tissues. This guy's about to cry again.
No. Why did you send me that?
I think, if I remember correctly, the editorial was titled, "Officer Fanone deserves the nation's gratitude. Sadly, that's not always what he's gotten." I mean, listen, I've got a pretty thick skin, but at that particular time, I was dealing with a lot of criticism, both external criticism from people I'd never met before in this country.
This dude's as dodgy as AF. He cannot stop looking down. He's made eye contact probably 5% of this interview.
Who had absolutely no idea what my experience and the experience of hundreds of law enforcement officers really was. And I was receiving a lot of internal criticism from the police department, from my fellow or former colleagues who didn't understand my motivations for speaking out, couldn't see the fact that that I was trying to get them acknowledgement, and it took its toll. And so having somebody like yourself write something in a major publication that I believe, here was someone who understood my motivations for, for putting myself out there that way. It meant a lot. It meant a lot.
You told me in an earlier conversation when I've had a chance to interview you before that you actually have it framed in your home.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead.
No, it was.
Can you two just hold hands and sing Kumbaya? So beautiful. That's
significant. There's been a lot of articles written about me that, some might say were more significant, but that's the only one I framed, so thank you.
Please. The honor is mine. Michael Fanone, thank you very much for coming to the Saturday Show, but more importantly, thank you.
Just come out, you two.
For your service.
Thank you.
Thank God that is over. These two soy boys, they should have just held hands and kissed on camera. This was an absolute nothing burger, folks. It was a chance to for these two lovers to sell a book. Absolute nothing burger. Tell me what you guys think in the comments. I don't really have anything else to add except I'm never going to get that time back. The only thing I got out of it was spending more time with you guys. So don't forget to like, share, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and I will catch you in the next video.